I'm Peter from Propertia Bali, and today we are talking about leasehold because it's confusing a lot of people. What is a lease versus rent and so on. So today I brought the sales manager from Propertia Bali, Joe, and he's going to explain a little bit about lease. Joe, what is a lease?
Leasehold effectively is where we have one local freehold owner, so the freehold owner of the land, and leasehold is lease of that land for a period of time.
Correct.
Where you can do whatever you want with it.
Yes. Why do you think that it's confusing so many people about the lease?
I think for most of our home countries, leasehold doesn't really exist, or if it does, it's for a very long period of time.
Correct.
999 years or something. I think it's confusing people because they consider it to be more like a rental agreement. Yep. The difference is when you lease the land, you have the absolute right to do whatever you want with it within the legal limits. I think people are a little bit confused by that, but when you take a lease of a land, usually it's between 25 to 30 years. In that period, it's completely up to you what you do with the land, whether you want to build a villa on it, knock the villa down, build another villa, completely up to you.
Correct. I've seen the questions, especially on our social media platform, and they are more or less all the same. What happens when the lease runs out?
Yeah.
That's a relevant question, right?
For sure. So a typical leasehold starts with 25 to 30 years. Thereafter, you need to be able to extend it in the future. The only way we can absolutely guarantee that is when we do the master lease at the beginning. We make sure that the right to do an extension is written into it. So the right to do the extension gives the lease taker the absolute right to extend it in the future. In an ideal world, that would be for a fixed period of time. So it would say 25 plus 25 or 30 plus 20, something like that. But they can extend it for a period of time. The difficulty is, how do we define the price in that? Yeah. So usually it would be at the time when you choose to do the extension, the land is independently valued by 3 agents, and then we take an average price of the land at the time from those 3 agents, and that will be the price of the extension in the future.
So it's important when you do your master lease agreement, if you're leasing a piece of land, it's very important that you make sure you have the lease extension. Do not let this lease extension be determined by the landowner, right?
No. So it needs to be determined independently. Of course, all the landowners have seen their values go up 300% in the last 2 years, and they think it's going to last forever. So it needs to be independently valued. Have 3 independent agents take a look at it, and then once you've got the average and work with the notary, then the extension price can be determined, and it should be based on the land only, not for the villa.
Very important. Land only. You already built $1 million villa on top of your land. That cannot be taken in consideration when you are doing the land extension.
Yes.
Another question was, there was a lot of statements saying, after the 25 years, the landowner will take your villa and the land. That's not true, right?
No, not if you have the extension written in there. But I think it's also one of those, if you didn't have the absolute definitions of the extension written in there, the chances of you being able to do an extension over the next 25 years are actually quite strong. But of course, if you have that extension written in there, then there's no way that they can turn it down.
So when you're buying a villa, if you're buying from Propertia Bali, we always check it. But if you're buying a villa, you need to look into the master lease agreement, check your extension possibilities, because they are crucial for the value of the property. If you don't have an extension, what happens, Joe?
If you have absolutely no extension,
just a handshake,
you choose not to do an extension and you get to the end of the 25 years, then your legal obligation is to hand the land back to the landowner with the contents on top. So you don't need to give back the doors and toilet and windows, but the building should remain.
Amazing. So lease, it's a very, very simple procedure, right? I mean, you go to the landowner, you lease it from him. What's the difference between lease and actually owning the land, like a freehold title?
Yeah, so if you're a leasehold, then there's a landowner that you will always refer back to who actually owns the land, and when you want to extend in the future, you go through him. If you have the freehold title, then you are in ownership of that land. But freehold title is only available for Indonesian citizens, so not possible for foreigners to purchase.
Correct. So as a hak milik certificate, freehold is only for Indonesian citizens, but you can, as a foreigner, you can change the title of the certificate, right?
So it's possible to purchase the freehold title and then change that title to HDB, Hak Guna Bangunan, which is basically the right to build, the right to use the land. And what that will do, you can only do it through a PTPMA. So you would need a PTPMA, which is a foreign-owned company. Then you can purchase the rights to that land and have it. And effectively, it works in a similar way to a leasehold, but direct with the government. So you get 30 years, 20 years, and 30 years, total of 80 years. What happens at the end of the 80 years?
No one knows. We will do another video about freehold. When you're leasing, which is how big a percentage in Propertia Bali is leasing?
80 to 90%.
80 to 90%, so there's absolutely nothing to be afraid of. You just need to go to the right notary and do the due diligence with your land, and then you can lease the property. So basically the notary is actually not looking at the property, he's more looking at the land lease.
Yeah, they're looking at the land lease, the zoning of the land, the access to the land, the length of the lease, the ownership rights of the lease, and that's effectively it.
Everything sounds super complicated. It's not. You just need to contact Propertia Bali about leasing a property or leasing a piece of land. Then come to Propertia Bali. We are always, our door is always open.
Yes.
And that's more or less it.
Are there any examples of the lease running out? I think it's too early to say has it happened in Canggu, but where we would see it as an example would be somewhere like Seminyak, Legian, the places that developed many years ago. Leasehold is not a new thing in Bali, it's been around for years. So those older leases in Legian and Seminyak where they took 20 years, I think people assume those 20 years would never come. There are examples of them getting to the end where they have no right to do the extension in their contract, and then therefore the landowner's looking at it thinking, I'm going to take my land back, right? It's leaseholds are very important to the people here because it's a generational thing. So they can pass it on to their children and grandchildren, and of course if you get to the end of the lease and there's no obligation to do an extension with the lease taker, then of course they'll want to take it back. But very rare.
I had a customer who was buying leasehold in Seminyak, no extension, and she asked about the value, and for me the value is very similar to renting out the property. There was 7 years left on the lease, and she asked, how much should I pay for this leasehold without an extension? And I said, you should compare it with yearly rental and then maybe deduct the profit that you want as an owner of a property if you're doing daily rental. So it's not worth a lot. Without extensions, they still think it's worth a lot because the property itself on top has been very expensive to build. But 7 years, no extension, for me, it's only rental value, honestly. The question was very relevant. What's the difference between rent and lease?
If you take a lease, you are leasing the land and you have the right to do anything you wish within the legal boundaries to that land. You can build a villa, you can knock it down, you can build another one, you can extend it, however you want to do it. If you're renting a structure that is already there on the land. So your obligation is to maintain that structure for the rental period. Of course, you can put curtains up, paint the walls and things like that, but structural changes, full changes to the land are not going to be allowed. So that's the difference between owning a lease of a land and just renting a property.
So you actually own the property on top when you're leasing. You don't when you're renting. It doesn't matter if you rent for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. There's a difference between rent and lease.
Yes.
Okay, this was a very, very short explanation about leasing in Bali. If you like this content, then please give us a thumbs up or make a comment and we will of course reply your question. And stay tuned because there's a lot more videos like this coming.